Greetings, greetings. How are we? Welcome along. It is Inspire and Be Inspired, another motivational conversation. We are focusing on another of the UK's finest DJs and one of the nicest guys I've had the pleasure of meeting in my years on the circuit. It is live on Monday evening here from the Costa Blanca. It's just turned 8 o'clock. And I send a shout out to everybody with me live around the world who may be watching. Mr. Bob Jeffries is a legend in his own right. I've said on many occasions when I've been talking to some of my guests down the years, I tend not to stick to the usual biography route when asking questions. And Bob is a gentleman that I've had the pleasure of working with closely at the vocal booth, but I am to find out a little bit more about the gentleman. So without further ado, let me bring him onto the screen and say, Mr. Bob Jeffries, how are you, sir? You okay?
Yeah, I'm very well, Andy. How are you, mate?
I'm good. I'm very good. I cannot start the stream without being very shaky to begin with. My eyes dart all over my equipment to make sure that I sound okay, I look okay. More importantly, we can see and hear you fine. Everything appears to be wonderful. So it is going to be my pleasure to get to know you that little bit better over the course of the next however long it's going to take. Right?
Yeah, great, fantastic.
Good. Well, you look great. You sound great. So we're gonna bed in. It is bank holiday in the UK, so I know a few people are out and about doing their thing. But if anyone does happen to catch this live and they do have any questions or any comments for Bob, then please do leave them in the chat. I can see them here, and when there's a gap in the conversation, I'll draw reference to them. And as always, I ask people watching the recording to do the same. Okay then, Bob. So as we were preparing to come live, I said that you're a gentleman who I know I can ask certain questions and get very truthful answers from. So as we're progressing, I'd like to find out a lot more about the man behind the music. But first, I guess we need to find out about your early years, exactly where you're from. You can be as specific or as general as you like about when and where you were born. So, and it helps us paint a picture of how you became the person that you are in the music scene.
Okay. I was born on the 10th of July, 1959, in Irvine, which is actually not that far from where we stay now. It's about maybe 5-6 miles away. Mum and dad, I'm a single child.
Okay.
And my dad was an engineer. My mum worked various jobs and then latterly was just at home as a housewife. And I was actually, when I was 4, we moved down to Cornwall. So I spent a year and started school in Cornwall from I was 4 till about 5, and then we came back up to Scotland again.
Okay. So if you can, from your earliest memories, paint a scene. So if we discount Cornwall, because really that's not a big part of the story, I wouldn't have thought. Paint me a picture of Irvine. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Yeah, that'll do it.
Irvine in the early 60s, because it's geographically, you have to forgive me, I've no idea where that is within the Scottish borders.
Yeah, it's on the west coast, about 25-30 miles southwest of Glasgow.
Okay.
So it's on the coast, on the west coast.
Mm-hmm. And is it a very densely populated area?
No, it's all sort of like small towns from about 30,000 up to about 50, 60,000, okay, dotted around that area. And then Glasgow obviously is the big city nearest to us, which is over a million, I think, over a million now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what was it a bleak landscape, or did you have memories of a colourful childhood, or was it, not long post? I keep saying that post-war. It's very unfair because it's like 15 odd years since the war had finished. But was there still the air of that? Did it feel like things were moving forward?
No, I think it was sort of it was like black and white TV, so it was sort of pre-colour TV, pre-decimal, all that sort of stuff. Irvine as a town was pretty in its kind of heyday then, but since then has sort of run down like quite a lot of other towns that had industry in them, but subsequently then the industry left, went abroad, or was taken over by somebody else.
Mm-hmm. When you say industry, mining or textiles, or what was it?
In our area, it was my dad worked in a bottle making factory, so it was all bottles for like whiskey bottles and stuff like that. We had ICI, the big petrochemical company beside us, and yeah, quite a lot of industrial type units. Mining a bit further out into the smaller villages, and yeah, a pretty sort of bit of everything really.
Okay, so at school life, were you a bit of a tearaway? Were you well behaved? Being what were you? Were you controlled with an iron rod, so to speak, or were you a bit of a tearaway? How do you remember life?
Actually, I really liked school. That sounds a bit kind of nerdy now, but I enjoyed school. And my dad was always keen on me getting an education, as was my mum at the time. So yeah, I tried to do as best as I could at school. And we went to one about in Irvine itself, which is about 3 miles from my house. And then they built a brand new school that I moved to in secondary school, just a mile down the road from my home.
Okay, sorry, I was just checking that. So brand new school, a mile from your home.
For secondary school, yeah. We were the first kids in the secondary school. As I say, it was just on our doorstep.
Mm-hmm. So a strong community from the off, really.
Yeah, and it was all sorts of small villages round about us. So kids came in from the small villages into the school, and because we weren't in a big, built up area, you sort of knew everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of kind of rural type of life.
Okay, so the people that came in from outside the area, did it ever get quite territorial at times?
Oh yeah. It's like small villages. I've got, where did you come from? I come from this village. All right, okay. And then there'd be some fights kick off and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's typical of the area, I think.
Mm-hmm. Typical of all areas. Postcode wars have always and will always exist. I want to say good evening to Big Man Boy. I was just making sure that everything was fine with the live. It is. And School is with us as well. Shout out to Soulful Session as his YouTube moniker. Okay, so are we a little early for music to appear on your in your line of sight in your senior school?
Yeah, I think so. Around about, I would say sort of 74, 75 was what kids were into. It was like glam rock type things, and then the start of punk coming in just after that, just when I was about to leave school. And when I left school, I was the only person left. I went on and did 6-year studies. I don't know if you had 6-year studies in England at the time. It was like you did ordinaries, then hires, and then you could do 6-year studies before pre-university.
Okay, well, sixth form, is that different to sixth form?
Yeah, it's almost like first year university you're doing, but within the school environment.
Okay.
And in my school, I was the only person left in my year. Everyone else had left. So it was like 1-to-1 teaching for me, and everybody, all my friends had jobs. So I'm like, I can't stick this. I'm the only person here, and I get 2 offers to go to university to study chemistry and physics, and I went, nah, I'm not going to do this. I went out and I got a job with a pharmaceutical company.
Okay,
and did my stuff, my further education, and I worked in the laboratories there. Okay,
so tell us exactly what that full-time job entailed then. It sounds very interesting.
Well, I worked for a big company
I'm sorry to cut you off.
All right.
I'm scratching my brain. Didn't Jeff Young follow the same kind of path as well?
Yeah, I listened to his interview, which was, I'm like, is he telling half of my story here? Yeah, Jeff was more sort of, I think it was to do with hospital type work.
That's right, yeah.
Whereas mine was pharmaceuticals and vitamins. So, and when I started at 17, I was on 17th birthday, I went into the laboratories, and it was like quality control, And then I moved into the process side of the laboratories where you're testing all the chemicals as they come through the process.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so at 17 years of age, you already found yourself as a person. You already know the character that you are. And you'd already spoken about the music back then. Was any kind of black music in your line of sight back then? I keep saying line of sight. Were you aware of that? Were you listening to anyone on the radio? What was the access like for music up there?
It was mostly, through the radio. Before I left school, it would all be radio or TV, like Top of the Pops or something like that. And the sort of, to paint a picture of our area, it wasn't very diverse. There was no black kids at my school, my secondary school at all. I think there was one Asian guy. So it was very west of Scotland, white. Mm-hmm. So I didn't get that mix until I left school and then started going to like local gigs.
Mm-hmm. And was that apparent immediately, the diversity? So the crowd was different, or just the music was different? Could you see a change in the mixture of the skins, so to speak?
Not at first. I still attended like local gigs, so it would be still the same ethnic. Mm-hmm. There's no diversity in the ethnic side.
You put it much better than I did.
So it was the first event I went along to. It was a local hotel, Claremont Hotel, which was about 5-6 miles from where I stayed. A Sunday night, and it was like funk they played. Mm-hmm. But they would mix it in with like Brian Ferry and stuff like that. Something that was coming out but had an edge. And all the guys who were there, this would be mid to late 70s, so like 77, 78. Mm-hmm. And all the guys wore like smart gear, wouldn't sit down in case they creased their trousers. It was all sort of image, like big wedge haircuts, and that was the sort of thing that was happening at the time.
Mm-hmm. So if so on the edge of the new romantic scene, but pre-new romantic, but that kind of fashion-esque.
New romantics. They were known in those days in this area as posers. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if you know that term.
Well, I've heard of a poser, but maybe not in that same.
These were like, the guys would have like almost like preppy. They'd like jumpers over their shoulders.
Okay.
Cool, like clothes on, expensive clothes, and just didn't want to like sweat sort of thing. Whereas there was the kids in the floor were really going for it. But there was a section of people who were like the cool kids.
Wow, that's difficult to try and imagine. So like a precursor to the football dresser, kind of. Yeah,
that would be it. Yeah, and that's sort of kind of it's a mate of mine who ran it, and I got to know him well and started DJing with him. A guy called Terry Quinn, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. But he introduced me to that sort of black music edge in a club setting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'd like to focus on when you say you started DJing. How did that happen? How did it come about? You'd already been buying your own records for some time. You had your own equipment. How did you get to that point?
Well, probably about 74, 75, our local youth club had bought a set of equipment and nobody wanted to work it. So me and one of my friends, Danny Kilpatrick, went in and we said we'd do it. We'd already got some of our own records at that time, and we said we'd do it. So that was my first introduction to, actually being up in a deck and playing music to people. Mm-hmm. And then when I went
on the mic from the very beginning, hosting on the microphone.
Yeah, we'd chat over the mic at that time, and from that, as I said, that gig I went to that Terry Quinn had, I went up and I would ask him about records, and he goes, "Oh, this guy knows what he's talking about," sort of thing. He's interested in the music, and I basically asked him, whenever you've got a set, could I get a set sometime? So I started doing like early sets for him.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Well, we have Mr. Bradley and Mr. Little joining us. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for passing through. Giving you your lovely nickname, Bobalito.
He still can't speak Spanish.
We'll get him sorted this year. Good evening,
Yeah,
Dave. Good evening,
definitely.
Steve. Okay, so that would have taken us into 77, 78 kind of time. You're at the beginnings, as you say, of being more aware of a diverse musical spectrum. And did immediately you think, wow, I like this, I want to get to know what he's playing a lot more?
Yeah, from that, I started going to other local gigs and moving further afield, like up into Glasgow, and going to like specialist music shops, which would be about 77, 78. There's a brilliant shop in Glasgow called Soundtrack that everybody went to, and it was like they got all the imports in from London on a Saturday morning, and it was like a queue at the door to get in, to get the best of the best, which is what I'm like. And everything that came in there, you're like, oh, I've got to get this.
Because most people who watch this will be right back with you when you talk about those times. It's not like we're telling anybody what they don't already know, but yeah. the music definitely defined us back then. Whether you were a DJ or not, people would go out of their way to get this music, wouldn't they? And if you didn't get it, it would be weeks or months sometimes before you'd be able to, before it came back around again. So it was a major part of life, wasn't it?
Yeah, especially in Glasgow, with there wasn't so many copies coming in to the record shops. Not like London, there was multiple different shops you could go to. There was probably only one or two that had import records for us. And this was just the sort of the introduction to the jazz funk scene for me. And we were buying all the new Japanese things that were coming in at that time. Really expensive at that point in time. But, it was these things like you had to have them.
Mm-hmm. And so did you make a name for yourself rather quickly from the music that you were getting? And did you have a very strong playing style? Would you go back and say, yeah, I kind of showed everyone what to do?
No, I would never say that. There was a lot of brilliant DJs, and even in those days, like 2 or 3 guys I knew that were really into the music, and I learned a lot from them. A local guy in Glasgow, John Kerr, who was everywhere, went to everything. He's known all over the UK as being like a tastemaker. So I was tuned in with John, went to his house a few times. He would introduce me to records I didn't have. And then it's sort of just building up what you've got in your collection, and you just expand it and expand it and expand it.
Okay. And then some of the earliest places you can recall travelling to, whether as a punter or as a guest DJ, as time progressed, as we moved into the 80s?
Yeah, there was loads in our area. I think I was in a club. I did all the local clubs in our area. A place called Rio's. The most famous one I did was Bobby Jones in Ayr itself, which I think I was there 3 different time spans. Went back, left again. And that would be in the sort of early 80s, DJing in there. But pre that, I was in the jazz funk scene, and we went all over the UK. We would go to Aberdeen for gigs, which is like 4 hours for here. Mm-hmm. We'd go to a place called the County Inn in Cambuslang on a Tuesday night, and there would be like 500 people in there, predominantly only dancing to like jazz funk music. So it was like a burgeoning scene at that time, and I was just getting into it. And then people would hear your name and say, "I'll get you on," and then you're like on the next flyer. So it was like momentum. It was like a big ball rolling.
Mm-hmm. So in relation to the full-time job, were you maybe asking how seriously you took it is probably the wrong way of phrasing the question. But I guess you were just living for the weekend, right? Week in, week out, and midweek as well. You're talking about a Tuesday night.
Yeah, well, in our area, at some points in those early days when I was like late teens, I would be working 5 nights a week DJing.
Okay.
So we'd have clubs down here. It would be a small venue. On a Monday night, it would be like 50 people. I did a thing in here called the Darlington Hotel on a Tuesday night, and you'd like 200 people in. And then I did the same thing on a Thursday night in there, and another 200 to 300 people on a Thursday night. Wow. And then at the weekends, it had like over 1,000 people on a Friday, Saturday night.
And is this a 2 a.m. kick out?
I think it was 1 at that time.
Yeah.
But everybody, we went out really early. Mm-hmm. Everybody went all around the pubs first, obviously, and then went to the gigs quite early in those days.
Yeah. And then kick out time and a good old punch up outside the chip shop. And still holding down a full-time job all through this.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just took early retirement last year, and I was with the same company for 46 years.
That's very impressive. That's very, very commendable indeed. Okay, so the jazz funk scene progressed and the music started to change. We've heard so many different stories from different people up and down the country about the different relevant scenes. The electro scene into breakdancing, into hip hop. Talk us through that era in the early 80s, should we say, early to mid 80s, and the explosion of that sound.
So early to mid 80s, that was one of my first sessions at that club called Bobby Jones. Mm-hmm. And I put on a couple of old days in there where we had like about 600-700 people. And we'd actually a couple of coaches from Birmingham came up. Mm-hmm. We'd invited these guys who I'd met through the jazz funk scene, and they all came up. They had 2 full coaches at 100 people. And that was diverse because that was nearly 99.9% black. Mm-hmm. Who'd came up in the coaches. And people in our local area were like, what the hell's going on here? What have you put on? And I'm like, this is what we want to do. This is the music that these people are into and what we're into. So it was like people coming together to be into the same sort of thing. And that was the first time I did like all days. I done them, I think, 84-ish. And then again back about 89 when Southport started, or Berwick, the first Southport Weekender started in 87.
So I've spoken to Frenchie, I've spoken to Colin Curtis, and I also spoke to Neil Rushton, and we were talking about the change in the scene, the change of the music. Was it very apparent, coming back to where I was saying about you being a jazz funk person, and then because there was a huge split, maybe a little bit later on in the UK scene as the sounds were changing and that all-day phenomenon started to phase out because the music was changing so much. Was it the same impact up north, or was it a little slower in you changing your music styles?
There wasn't the same sort of electro vibe, or people were into the same electro thing here. I remember doing it would be early 80s, maybe 84-ish, in Clouds in Preston, an all day. And it was the time when Steve Arrington record came out. But all the kids who were at that gig in Preston were all into electro, and the DJ before me hammered electro for about an hour and a half. And I went on, I went, this is not what I play. And so the first record I put on, I think it was Steve Arrington, and a couple of guys ran up to the stage going, what the, in my face. I'm like,
really?
I'm sorry guys, this is not what I do. And at that time you had 2 rooms. So at the same time I did the jazz room on the side. The guy Dave Angel did it. A few other, Colin Curtis was at Clouds in Preston. All these guys, Frenchie, Hutchie, loads of guys playing 2 different rooms who played 2 different sets. One out and out jazz and the other one the main room. But as I said, we could feel that, whoa, where's this? This electro thing is like, know what's happening up our way.
Mm-hmm. And so after the Steve Arrington, where did you go?
I never played that record again.
Guns? Did you stick to your guns through that?
I stuck to it. It's weird looking back now because some electro records I actually quite like now, but at the time I'm like, this is like jarring against what we were playing in gigs. Mm-hmm. It just didn't sound the same.
I hear that. I hear that. And you were never pressured. You never felt the peer pressure to say, okay, we've got to go. This is the movement. Because I guess it wasn't so influential for you at the time, I guess.
The lecture thing wasn't, although kids were doing it, you could see them doing it in the streets and stuff, like even up here, it was bigger for like probably younger kids, but not for us at that time, in the DJ places I was playing in.
I get you. Good evening, John Rogers, joining us, popping into the chat room. Thanks for saying hello, my friend. Don't forget, guys, if you are watching live, please do feel free to say hello. Let me welcome you along. We are just exploring the early days of Bob's career, or music, because it's strange to call it a career when you've held down a job for so long by the side of it, and yet you are one of the most accomplished names on the UK circuit, right?
It's just, yeah, I always think back now and go, what if, if you'd made that decision to go full time DJing, what would have made your life had. That's a decision you make at that time, but it was sort of ingrained into me from mum and dad that, you need a job. You need to have a DJing's not a real job.
Well, it's still not, but don't tell anyone. Did you ever come close? Did you ever come close on making that decision?
A couple of times I went, because I was doing a lot more gigs and I get invited to lots of things all over the country. And I'm like, there's maybe something in this, but I don't know why. I've never analysed to see why I made that decision. But I think it's probably in your genes from when you're growing up as an early age.
It was ingrained in you. Okay, so you talked about the jazz. It's a question that I've never had really the opportunity to ask anybody. As a jazz DJ, not so much a jazz funk, but as a jazz DJ, what was the purpose when you were going out to play a set? Were you, to say it out loud sounds weird in my head, were you trying to make people dance, or were you trying to impress them with music they'd not heard before that they probably couldn't dance to? Was that ever a sort of like an issue, or is that a ridiculous question?
No, it's not a ridiculous question. I think after the jazz funk thing sort of kind of petered off, a lot of people moved into the funk scene or the new music scene, and another branch split from the jazz funk scene into more older, different jazz, like a lot of Latin type jazz, mambos, anything like that. Fast jazz dancing became massive. And we did gigs up here in Glasgow where there'd be a separate jazz room, and Paul Murphy, the famous London DJ, would come up with a box of records and sell them all at the gig, because everybody was like, he had the best jazz at that time anywhere in London. So everybody would be hammered to buy these things off him. So it was a bit of kind of educationalism, but at the same time you're going, these guys are the best dancers. I'm going to show them that I've got the things that they can really express themselves to.
Mm-hmm. Well, you saying that, being around at the Birmingham All Dayers and subsequently having the same said dancers at my own parties, coming to see me at Southport or whatever, not afraid if you made the wrong selection, not afraid to let you know, because it's like, you're killing our flow, man, what's going on? So you must have experienced that once or twice. We all have.
Yeah, well, in that jazz scene, a lot of the guys know the music very well. And if you play the wrong tempo or a different version than they know, they'll quite often tell you exactly where you're going wrong.
Mm-hmm. And is that, do you think that's right? Who's in charge, the DJ or the dancer?
It depends what event you're at. I've been at jazz gigs where it's clearly the dancers that are influencing the DJ. Mm-hmm. And I've been at other ones. I've done to Giles's place at Dingwalls, and where there's very educated dancers, but he's moving them in a certain direction. So there was a bit of both, really. I would say in that jazz scene.
Lovely. So shout out to Andy Tomo, Paul and Helen are locked on. Good evening. As are Paul and Yvette. Good evening. We definitely have music royalty with us listening to your stories. So there's too many individual parties, too many individual events to talk about one by one. But you mentioned earlier about the first Southport Weekender at Prestwick. You were there from the very beginning. You played at that first one.
I'd say Berwick, yeah.
Berwick, not Prestwick. Sorry.
Yeah, Berwick, 1987.
I'm getting my airports mixed up in my head.
Yeah, it was weird because I'd been to Caister, kind of 83, 84, 85, and I met Alex Lowe's, and I DJ'd for him at his area up in the Newcastle a few times. And then he said to me and Tom Jackson, do you want to come down and meet us at Berwick at a holiday camp? I'm thinking of starting a weekender. And we were like, that sounds all right, because we'd been at Caister, we knew what weekenders were all about. So we're like, yeah, that's good work. So we went for a meeting down there with Alex, and he explained it all, and we're like, this could be huge. This could be really huge.
And so did you get hold of your own room from the very beginning, or was it slowly progressing, finding the formula that worked?
For how do you mean?
When you were playing at that first one, when you said it was going to be huge, so you were playing from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Did you have your own room? Were you allowed to curate your own room from the beginning, or?
No, I was one of the DJs on the bill for Alex, and there was a main room, and then there was a side, almost like a corridor that the jazz room was in. But the very first event, it was brilliant. I mean, I could see it right away that this is going to be a really big gig. Mm-hmm. And I think the first one, it's people say, yeah, I was there. It's like everybody says, like, I went to see the Beatles or something. It's like, no, there was like 400 people there at most at the first one. Mm-hmm. But that was the spark that you could see this was going to be massive.
Following on from you mentioned about Caister, because that was a bit of a jaunt for you to get all the way down there. They were the first ones really for the blueprint of the Ordayers, the Weekenders. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think Alex had been speaking to a few people, and I met him at Caister, and he'd got a few ideas, and then he'd been speaking closely to like Nicky Holloway and people like that, and saying you should maybe try and do one of your own somewhere else in the UK, like not where they were in like Great Yarmouth or the London scene, like take it somewhere else. And that's why the first Weekenders were called Up North Promotions.
Mm-hmm. 87, I think, if I remember when I was talking to Alex, he said that was the first one.
87.
Okay, so by this time, house music was, already a big thing. Had you jumped onto the house train, so to speak, from the off, or did it take you a few years?
No, from the off. That club in there, the Bobby Jones I was like, that's when that'd be Love Can't Turn Around, which would be about 85, 86, and all the stuff that came out in tracks. I hammered them in that club, and it was like, this is so fresh. I'd play Love Can't Turn Around maybe 3 times in one night. It was that, such a response to it. And at that time,
still such an amazing record.
Groundbreaking record. And the people got on it because I had the enthusiasm for this sound. I'm like, this is going to be the big thing. And then progressing, I also loved rap. I was hugely into rap music, and I played a bit of both. And then so the Weekenders came, and we played a bit of everything at Berwick, a lot of 70s soul stuff, but also all the sort of kind of brand new rap and all the brand new house things that were coming out.
And then, so did you ever feel that you wanted to expand your library and start going back? Because, once you start to hear some old jazz stuff, then you want to find out a little bit more about other artists, and you definitely go down that rabbit hole, right?
Oh yeah, it was crazy. In those days, we used to go everywhere. Hunting for records. I'd go down to Manchester there was a shop in a basement. I'm trying to think the name of it. I think it was called Stars or Stripes or something like that. American cutouts, loads of them, and they were all like under £1 each for these. And I'd come home, play them in the car, and it was like, come home with 100 albums, and you're like, I've got to have it. We would at those times look at who the artists were and then get everything that they'd done, back catalogue them all. So you would look at, I don't know, somebody like Ronnie Foster, that played on a lot of George Benson albums, and you go, right, I'll buy all Ronnie Foster's albums because I rate them. And there'd be at least one good track on one of those albums you could use in that sort of jazz scene. But also the soul scene as well. You were like learning off people like my good friend Billy Davidson up in Aberdeen, who would he's one of the ones that kind of got me into that sort of sound. And he'd play some amazing music, and it was like, brain, give me more, give me more, give me more, and hunting for other things that you'd never heard before in your life. And that's how that sort of progressed. It was a sort of new stuff and old stuff at the same time.
And there was the camaraderie there. There was no sort of like tape over the records, marker over the titles. Were you all sharing title? Was there ever a little bit of, I can't really give you that information?
Not in our scene, funnily enough. In the Northern Soul scene, yeah, definitely. It was DJs got booked because they had only those certain records, and they wouldn't tell you what the records were unless you really like trawled about and found, by word of mouth, and you maybe hear, it sounds like somebody else, and you go, I've got that. I know what that is now. So it was a bit of that, but not in that sort of our scene. It was more like sharing. Have you heard this? You've got to get this. That was more our scene.
Beautiful. So was at any point were you asked to share your knowledge in print? Was there any journalistic any times you were asked to write any reviews or did reviews for different articles, different publications?
Yeah, I used to write in Blues and Soul and do a gig guide and review records, and then for a local magazine in Glasgow. Latterly, that's jumped on a bit. It was M8 magazine, and I used to do the soul reviews of all the brand new stuff that was coming through.
Yeah, but that's going quite forward, isn't it, M8?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned about the music changing. Were you ever try just getting music, just amassing your collection? And do you still have your vinyl collection, by the way?
Yeah.
You still got it. How is it? How big is it, basically?
Well, I've got a lock-up. I've also got another lock-up garage and a full room in the house, all vinyl and CD.
And do you take time to go back through them and ripping them digitally to play out sometimes, or do you just try and find if you can buy the digital versions?
If I can find it, or I'll probably get multiple copies of things that I've not even opened, to be honest, because it was like in the late 80s, it was voracious. It was like every penny you'd got, it was like pumping it out and getting all these records that you could. Getting to the point where you were like walking home or something, you hadn't enough money to put petrol in your car or get the bus. It was mad. The
curse of the vinyl lover. The curse of the vinyl lover. So at your height, if you can say that, where would you say, what was one of your biggest achievements, or when you look back, you think, what, that was where I was at my peak. I was at my most prolific, traveling around and doing some of the best parties. Where would that immediately make you think of? What era?
I would think probably about 87 to about 93 was sort of, I was working everywhere from all days to 1989 started with a couple of guys who formed a thing called Streetrave, which was massive beside us, and I worked at all days and all nighters, and that was at the start of the sort of rave scene here, and did quite a lot of their big festivals all over Scotland, playing at their events. So that, and then from about moving into the early 90s, I was involved in the sub club in Glasgow, which was probably... When
you say involved, to what capacity?
As in DJing in the sub club, round about, coming up right until about the year of culture, which was 92. So I did alternate Saturdays and a guy from Glasgow who now stays in Essex, Shagan, did the alternate Saturdays to me, along with the guy who ran the club.
And all along these times, the crowd, the following, so to speak, were you finding was it the same crowds, or a younger crowd in the clubs than obviously you'd been playing to years before?
Quite a few come with you, and then there's other younger kids coming up who are just finding it for the first time. So yeah, when I started with Streetrave, it was quite a young crowd, and they were sort of 18, 17, 18. Some of them even sneaking in when they were at 15 into some of these raves. So it was like I would say that was a huge change around in the kind of music scene at that time.
And did you slotted in comfortably? You felt that you were bang on the money, and the kids were loving everything you were doing?
Yeah, well, I did Streetrave for a revival a couple of weekends ago. In there, they used to do a big it was like a rock venue, which they took over and did raves in, called the Pavilion, right down at the beachfront. And a couple of weeks ago, they did it outside of it. They can't get in it because it's now a kids' play area. But the building's still there, but it's massive. But outside, they'd every rave band you could think of was on stage, and we did the Sunday to 5,000-6,000 people.
Incredible! I did see all the reviews of that, and then I did see a few days later, if I'm not getting everything's mixed up, they were given a contract on an annual basis now because it was so good for the area. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm not getting
that's right.
Something else.
No, they've got a contract now for the next 5 years to do similar things down there. It's a guy, Ricky McGowan, who runs that. I've known Ricky since first met him in about 1989 when they started the street rave, and then they changed the name about 93 into Colours, and they've done other festivals under the moniker of Colours.
Huge, absolutely huge. So if you had to choose when you were being booked, well, not when you were being booked for the events, because I'm guessing that the booking would really dictate what you were playing. Did you have a preference where you would prefer to do the more jazz funk, old school sounding, for want of a better word, or then pushing forward with the progressive sounding soulful house music? Was there either or that you preferred to try and get?
I like it all, to be honest. The only thing I probably didn't get into all through the years was reggae.
You couldn't. Some of the clubs, correct me if I'm wrong, you wouldn't be able to play a jazz funk set in the middle of a house set like you could at some of the more discerning events, right?
No, and the kind of moving into sort of mainstream but black music clubs, it would be a sort of, you knew where the lines were and what would work for you, and what would work for the crowd. So yeah, you would get that. But there was specialist gigs I did, still continuing into the 90s, I think called Club Sandino, which was a jazz only event, and that was money for people in Nicaragua and places like that. It was a sort of kind of almost like a political driven event where a guy, Nick Peacock up here, who's a famous jazz DJ. So it was like that sort of scene was like very niche, and you knew exactly, that's what you were playing in that event. And other gigs I would do, like Tom Jackson, a good friend of mine, was actually my best man at my wedding. He had a thing called The Kilt, where we did almost like 70s revival soul scene with the odd new thing coming out, getting played at it. So yeah, you knew from the bookings and who had booked you, and if you'd been to the club. A lot of clubs I went to first to get the vibe of them, see what they were like, and then you knew what right, I know where we're going here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as the clubbing scene ebbed and flows with the energy, sometimes it was really busy. A lot of the energy would be lost out of the clubbing movement, so to speak. Holding down your job full time alongside this, did you ever your desire, your energy, did that ever wane going out? Did you ever think, I think I've had enough now? Or have you always been up there because it's been such a passion for you?
I think up there because music is such a big passion in my life. It's been there, as I said, since late 70s. So, yeah, I don't think I've all wanted to throw the towel in. I think I did think about it once and then went, nah, I enjoy this too much.
What was the catalyst that made you think that then? Can you remember?
No, not really, no. It was just a sort of, it's not getting, you sometimes get a wee bit fed up with the scene. You're going, it's a bit sort of, it's not boring, but it's like, is this the same thing, over and over and over again? Is it going anywhere? And then there'd be a new music come in and you go, all right, okay, now we're changing tack a bit.
Okay, so was it the music that you were getting bored of, or that you weren't being motivated, you weren't getting the feedback from the crowds? Because I know exactly what you're saying, but I'm trying to understand from your perspective.
I think a bit of it, you must go through a certain point where you feel as if you're going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting it, and you're wanting to shove something, and you maybe the dance floor's clearing a bit, and you go, they're not coming with me on this.
So you had to reach for the big record, and that would kind of like, you feel you're cheating yourself a little bit.
A little bit, and I can get that, because people are going out, and they maybe only go out, when you're younger, you're going out all the time, every week, non-stop, hammering it. A few years goes past, things change. People have had kids. They then want to maybe go back out again, and they want to hear those tunes that they heard like years ago. And you're like, well, I've still been DJing, and it's moved on here. We're at a different situation now. I says, I can drop one of them now and again for you, because I'd get some guys go up and go, can you play such and such? I always loved that tune. I'm like, yeah, 20 years ago. But you know what I mean?
Difficult. It's a difficult one to be.
It's difficult because
right?
People are they're hard earned money, and they want to be entertained. They want to have a good time with their friends and that. But it's like, unless they're very discerning and they know where they're going to, the club they're going to, if any punter who comes in is like not in that scene, arrives on the night, and they're expecting something totally different, you're like, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And it can be awkward at times. I've had conversations you probably had as well. Somebody comes up, can you play such and such? You go, this is not really what we do here. I appreciate what you're saying, but this is not that kind of night.
Are you the kind of person that would then focus on that one naysayer all evening while the rest of the crowd's having a great time? You can't help but see that sour face on someone who's waiting to hear whatever.
No,
can you brush that off?
I just it bugs you for a minute or two, and then you go, well, they're either going to stay or they're going to leave. And if they leave, then they obviously don't like it a lot. But I've also had the opposite, and somebody at the end of the night goes, I stuck with it and had a great night, brilliant, really enjoyed it. So sometimes it takes a bit of time to get people right into what you're trying to do. And it's not educational, but it's a bit educational.
Mm-hmm. I hear that. I understand that. That does have to. You have to have a confidence, a faith in yourself and what you're trying to do, and then push on forward really, and say, well, this is what I've been brought here to do. Some people don't have the strength to be able to do that. They just give in and just say, let's give them what they want. But it's a three-way conversation, isn't it, between the dance floor, the promoter, and the DJ? I think it always is. I think it always is. Good afternoon, Emily. Good evening. She says, yes, always stay true to yourself. And that's definitely one thing you have done. Out of the many people that I know on the scene and the many people that I've had the pleasure of working with, you always come across as, really amiable. Amiable? I don't know. Yeah. My brain's fried today. And you always have a great crew of people that are with you to support you. So you're doing something right. Did you ever dabble in production or edits or anything like that? Was that anything that ever interested you?
I did a slight dabble in it a long while ago. My friend of mine, Scott Gibson, and we'd put something together. But I just think with the amount of work during the work, I went on to like shift work at work as well. When I moved from the lab side of things, I moved into production. and became a shift manager. So you've not got the same time on that. So that sort of I'll leave that, I'll park it, and I'll play somebody else's edits. But my head's went round about and went now, since I took early retirement, well, I could maybe do edits now. I could get a hold of the software and try this myself.
And what angle would you go, without being specific? What do you think you'd be best at?
I think definitely something in that house scene, but just to get the right vibe, I'd have to sit down and have a think about it for a while, and just
not edit for edit's sake, though.
No,
sometimes you do hear a lot of that.
I don't see the point of regurgitating the same old record over and over and over again, or there's a lot just now, the disco scene, and I love that disco scene, but there's a lot of brilliant disco records that have not even been looked at yet. So maybe that's an angle, because there's a lot of edits you hear, it's the same thing, the same production, and there's other disco records I'm like, they're huge disco records that have been totally forgot about, because they've not been either known at the time, or there's very little quantities of them. And my mate Paul Stewart from Aberdeen, he would say that as well. There's loads out there that they've not even scratched the surface yet.
Okay, so watch this space.
Hopefully.
Well, Paul has given you a big thumbs up earlier anyway. I want to give a mention, actually, just in the back of my mind, to Paul Ross, who's been doing some very interesting edits as well, with some not so famous tunes, and I think he's going to be bringing out some rather interesting stuff as we move forward. So I've got to give him a lot of praise. Yeah,
I've been playing a few of his Strider edits on my radio show. So yeah, they've been going down a storm. And his production, he's got a certain ear. He's definitely got an ear for it.
Right. Well, you mentioned the radio show on Starpoint. How long have you been doing that now?
Well, I used to do a Tuesday night from 9 till 11. Did that for a few years, and then just before lockdown, I went to a Saturday afternoon from 1 till 3, which I think is a great spot. And Carl, who owns the station, doesn't tell you what to play. It's like it's your own show. You produce it yourself. It's whatever I want to play, basically.
Wonderful. And so the Sweet Soul events as well. You've been, as you said, you've been promoting for decades now. The Sweet Soul, was that a brand that's been around for a long time, or was that a new idea that you had?
Well, when I look back at old flyers, I'm a bit of a hoarder for flyers as well. I found the very first one me and my mate Alistair put on, which I think was 2002. Okay. And we called it New Soul Productions. And it was everything current that was Soulful House in one room, and then upstairs in the first venue we had like a 70s throwback, like modern soul, as they would call it. And that was 2002. Me and my wife Lorna put gigs on from then till about 2016. But we thought then that there was far too much on. So we then moved to doing our yearly charity event in 2016.
Okay, so what was the motivation to get involved or stand up for cancer?
Well, Lorna's dad died when she was only 3 and her sister was 1. And my mum died a few years ago now, and she'd cancer as well. So it was something that was close to our family. It hits every family near enough and all over the world. And it was just something we felt quite passionate about. We want to give something back. If we can utilise all of our friends, all of our people who are into the same sort of music to come along, share that with us, and, get money together for cancer research, this is what we really want to try and do. So that was the first one in 2016. Missed a couple of years, obviously, for COVID. And the one coming up this summer, Saturday, the 1st of July, will be our 6th event. And we've so far, not counting this year's money, but we've raised over £50,000. So with the help of all of our friends and everybody who attends the gigs and puts money to the raffle tickets, everything.
It's really commendable. You're getting a hell of a lot of support up there with the local press. As soon as you put the hotel rooms on sale, they get snapped up immediately, right? And as you say, the 1st of July is the next event. So give us some details on that, and then I'm going to dig a little bit deeper about the promotions. So it's Sweet Soul all dayer, Saturday the 1st of July at...
It's in the Park Hotel, Rugby Park, right beside the football ground, Kilmarnock football ground, and that's where we've done it since 2016. It goes from 2 in the afternoon to 1 in the morning. Tickets are £20 each, and all the proceeds go to cancer research. So we normally get about between 400 or 500 people attending the event, and we split that. So we've got an afternoon session that kicks off at 2 and runs right through till 11 in one room, and then the big room opens at 8 o'clock. So 2 rooms are running together for a couple of hours, and then we finish off everything all together in the one big room at night.
Lovely. I know we've got a few people travelling up from south of the border, I like to say. So it's going to be a great day indeed. Good evening, Angela. Angela Colossi says she's a little bit late. She's going to check it back, but Bob is a ledge. So let me bring you back, if you're okay for time, to the promoting and the motivation. Obviously, it's about sharing great music, but the highs and lows and the frustrations that you may have had down the years over a 20-year period. Has it all been plain sailing? Have you lost a fair bit? You made a fair bit?
No, on the promotion side of it, we did okay, I think, for a while. There was only one, I think, event that we had to move venue at the very last minute. There was something, I can't remember why we lost the venue. It was double booked or something, and we had to move venue. And that was the lowest number we had at an event. And I was like, me and Lorna went, is this the writing on the wall? Because you're always thinking you're only as good as the next event that's coming up. And the model was good, and the people who were coming were good, but I think that one just kind of tilted and went, and we had another think about it, and we kept going with events. But then there seemed to be in our area like a proliferation of events. It was like every weekend then there was something new on with the same small pool of people. So it's like you're fighting against other promoters. They weren't putting them on the same night, but there wasn't enough space in between gigs. So you're like, well, maybe we should just call it a day at that, and we'll concentrate on more charity event instead. And plus, at the same time, I would be invited to DJ at other events anyway. So we just went, let's just leave it at that.
It did actually get to that point of oversaturation.
I think so. And it's become, up here now, it's like there's something on all the time. It's like a throwback to, I would say, probably the sort of late 80s, where everybody was a promoter and everybody wanted to put something on. And that's brilliant. But if you've only got a small pool of people and everybody's fighting for the same pool of people, then it just dilutes the nights that are on, and it becomes more and more awkward to try and get something happening.
That's one of the things that I've always spoke about, and I always look for people who the focus on the community, because it's the community that you focus on and provide for those guys, and they will follow you around. But as you say, that pool slowly gets smaller and smaller. It's not that their passion for the music, they lose energy for it. It just other things take their attention. I'm just reading here. Michael Scholar, forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrect. He says, Sweet Soul is something to look forward to in Kilmarnock, and it's for a great cause. Michael Scholar. I think I might.
Scholar, Scholar. He's a guy who gives us great donations, Michael, and a really nice guy, and supports our cause. So thanks a million for that, Michael.
Respect to Michael. So we kind of skipped through many years of you being out and about, and I said from the very beginning, I'm not ashamed to say, not really knowing too much in depth about your history. I'm not sure if there's any really important parts that I've missed that I haven't spoken to you about. Is there anything that you think we should be talking about that we've missed, or any particular eras, any moments, any scenes that you feel were really quite pivotal in the way that Bob Jeffries' career was shaped?
I think going back, I think the early 80s was a time where if I wasn't DJing somewhere, we would go out and go all over the country to different events. So we went to the Hacienda when it opened up with Graham, and that's pre-Acid days when he was playing like James Brown and stuff in the Hacienda when it opened up, and we would go to there. I went along at the tail end Wigan Casino when it was in its sort of final days in the early 80s, and I liked to go to different places with my friends at that time and see what was happening in different bits. And I think it's definitely an education, both musically and like meeting different people and sowing your seeds for your other gigs that you've got coming up, because you'd make a lot of different contacts. And I did a lot of stuff down in that sort of area, sort of Manchester, sort of Liverpool, Leicester, all that sort of areas, and up Newcastle. So there was, at that time, we were moving about and going to different places, different events. Even if I wasn't DJing, we'd go. It was quite a kind of travelling scene at that time.
A very purpose-driven trips for networking. It sounds like it was a bit contrived when you say, you're going out there networking and it sounds a bit seedy that way. Then it was very natural.
It was going for like obviously for a night out and enjoying yourself with your friends, but at the same time you're going, whoa, what's happening here? Could we take a bit of this and mould it and work it back at our place? So that's kind of informative years. Mm-hmm. I would say, so those sort of early 80s, and then
go on, sorry.
And then sort of early 90s, I went with my friend Billy Kelty, who owned a record shop in Glasgow, 23rd Precinct, and I went with him to New York for the music conference, and that was like an eye opener. I think that was 93 for what their club scenes was like. Because we went to the Sound Factory Bar, and some of the bigger, I'm trying to think the name of a couple of clubs we went to.
Is it Limelight, Twilight?
Limelight at that time. So these were massive, and these were eye-opener clubs going, whoa, this is like a different scene totally again. It's like New York. You had to go down like a slide into the dance floor. It was like, this is like a different thing altogether. This is like crazy in that New York scene.
So you only had the posers, you never had the freaks.
No, there's probably a few freaks along the way, but the late 70s was definitely the posers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you talk about going over to New York. I immediately, when I think of yourself, your sound, would you say you are more of a New Jersey fan? Is that your sound on the house scene?
I definitely like vocals, predominantly gospel vocals, that sort of church vibe where you've got a singer who can really let rip. That's the sort of the sound I like to hear. Yeah.
And when you're going out and about now and you see a lot of the music and the same DJs who are still able to share that sound, does it give you hope for the younger generation to still enjoy that music? And do you still have that passion to try and break new music all the time?
Yeah, predominantly a lot of gigs I do, it's like vocal booth where you give us a chance to play new stuff, and it's mostly on that sort of vibe. I like to play the soulful vocal, probably a couple of edits mixed in with that, but not the sort of kind of obvious edits. But things like Grant Nelson does, like Pat Bedeau does, that sort of vibe. I love that sort of deep, burbling bass sound that they manage to get through their sounds.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'll be the first one to admit when you first came along and played at Vocal Booth Weekender, I was sticking you and getting you to do me some funk and some sort of like R&B sets, and then it was like, okay, no, let's get the man to play some house. And then last year for the closing party, playing before, I'm not getting confused, am I? It was before my set for the closing party, right? Last year.
Yeah. Yeah,
and, because I remember you were very supportive. I just found out that Roger the Doctor had passed away, having to take over from your wonderful set. I listened to that set. I just questioned myself then. I got completely confused. But and we're looking forward to getting you back again this year, of course. So you're way too humble to admit this, but would you ever allow yourself to say that you were kind of a trailblazer in your time? You shaped the scene from where you are. You've been around for a long time at some really important moments. Would you ever allow yourself to say that?
I wouldn't say that. I think there's a few people that influenced me musically and as a DJ, and I think modest a small M. But in this area where we live, that I worked in every club that was in this area, so it was well known, and I think people would say that I had a good musical taste.
Mm-hmm. So you weigh a lot of weight on that, because that's all that matters, really. You've never been one for the bells and whistles. You've let the music do the talking all the time.
No, I think if people come up at the end of the night and they say, that was one of the best records I've ever heard in my life, that means something to me, and I'll remember that for quite a while. It's a common thing if you're in a club and you're listening to a sound and you're with somebody and you get it and they get it. It's like it's a connection. It's bigger than anything else, I think. Mm-hmm. There's something deep about it, listening to a record which means something to two people who are having like a conversation. I've seen where you just stop for a minute and go, did you hear that? Did you hear that the same way I'm hearing that? And they go, yeah, that is like unbelievable. That's one of the best things I've ever heard in my life.
Magical moments when that happens, right?
It's true. It's true. And I think I spoke to a few people and they say if you meet somebody, then you're meant to meet them. And when you meet them, you're meant to take something off them and they take something off you. And that's maybe deep and a bit spiritual, but I think that is the case. If you meet somebody and there's a spark, some sort of spark there, you definitely come away from that conversation altered slightly. I don't know if there's a way of saying it better, but that's how I would describe it.
I get you. Well, there is a cliche, a meme, whatever, a saying that people may not always remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And I think
I'd agree with that.
That'll definitely ring true to all of your DJ sets and being on the dance floor, with that both looking at each other at the same time. But it's actually been really interesting for me to find out a little bit more about you. I do feel that there's a whole lot more that I'm still to find out about. And what's very apparent is your passion for the music that hasn't waned. You have all this time on your hands now. So we are definitely going to see some productions. I know that. I know that's going to happen.
If I can fit that in between playing golf twice a week, doing the radio show, taking the dog a walk, and having a happy marriage, all of that combined would be brilliant.
I love it. Actually, you saying about the golf, we do need to talk. Maybe you don't get to Vocal Booth in time for the golf day. When do you arrive?
No, we arrive mid-afternoon on the Thursday.
Okay, and it might be a bridge too far asking the wife if you can come to Vocal Booth and play golf, or should be.
Yeah, that might be a step too far. You know me. You know me.
I know you. I know. Well, that's why I didn't mention it. Although saying that, taking very good care in your palatial living for the few days in Villa Hayasa, you know.
Yeah, I think moving there, Andy, it's been like brilliant. It's one of the most beautiful places we've ever been. Not just the hotel is outstanding, but the actual town itself is so pretty. If people are listening in and they've never been, they have to go. It's the most beautiful town, the most beautiful frontage. We've had some great meals there, lovely people. The event is like blossoming since you moved to that new hotel, and it's so friendly. The staff who work there are unbelievable. I'm just saying this because you're sitting talking to me. It's like it is such a friendly event and such nice people. And Villa Llosa is just the most beautiful place in the world.
It is. Well, thank you for saying, and Lorna is putting up some hearts in the chat. I appreciate you saying that. You saw me revealing the lineup today for the Vocal Booth Weekender. It hasn't been without our challenges, but we do move forward together. And, I'm genuinely, thrilled to have you by my side pushing forward. You're someone who is definitely very important to the event, yourself and all the crew that you bring along. So thank you for mentioning that at the end of this conversation.
No, we just love the event, Andy. It's both where it was before and where it is now. It's just, as you describe it, it's a family. It is a family event.
Beautiful. Thank you for saying so. Okay then, Bob. So I think I will just again thank you for your time this evening. I'm guaranteed that when we finish, you're going to say, "Oh shit, I didn't mention this. I didn't talk about that. I didn't speak about anything else." But it won't be the last time that we talk, and I'd love to bring you back on with some of the guys that you've been rubbing shoulders with since the late 70s, early 80s, because I think we could have a really great conversation. Your knowledge is definitely what we need on this scene, and I say again, your energy is a pleasure to see.
No, it's been brilliant. Thanks very much, Andy. I appreciate it, mate.
Thank you, my friend. Take care.
Yep, see you soon.
See you later. Okay, so Bob is off. I enjoyed that. Sometimes I speak to people and I feel that I shouldn't be talking to them, that they're way above my league, but Bob is a really down-to-earth gentleman, and he definitely can give us all a lot of hope about the music and the parties that we go out and get down to. Shout out to David. Thank you, Mr. Lothian. Thank you to Schoolie. Angela is saying, yes, I completely agree about Villa Hayasa. Thank you all. If you're not aware, vocalboothweekender.com. We've just revealed the lineup for this year. Come and join us. Next up, from one of the originators to the new blood, you can see here. Next week, I'm going to be talking to Ben and to Miggs, aka the Journeymen, and I am going to be having a rather different conversation with those guys. I'm not going to be delving too much into their histories. I'm going to be discussing how it feels to be amongst the UK's freshest talent, making the most noise at some of the biggest parties in the world. Okay, so that's going to be next week, live and direct on your YouTube, and always available for watching again. Thank you so much for being here. I want to say, if you've recently subscribed, your name will be here on this list. I did see you popping on the screen earlier, Walter, so thank you for subscribing. If you've enjoyed the conversation, then please do like the video. I ask that because it will allow us to get seen by more people. And if you aren't subscribed to the channel, then do subscribe, because it will give you a reminder every time we go live. If you need any graphics or any website work, then I'm your man. Thank you again for your time.